Good day, everybody, and welcome to Workbench Creations, where I'm going to take you through all sorts of little scratch building and modification adventures. Um, Nothing too over complex or anything, just the stuff that's in the back of my mind and just sharing a lot of my ideas as my model building journey continues. And yeah, so what do we have today? We got it's the Sd.Kfz 7/1, and it's the 20 millimeter flak furling gun tractor. And this is your classic Tamiya. It came out probably in the 70s. It's a nice kit. I've always enjoyed these big gun tractors. They're just behemoths, big giant things. And this kit, I remember seeing this kit as a kid at my local hobby shop back in the early 80s, and I was always quite mesmerized by it. So finally I acquired one. Now, yes, it is a bit of an older kit. Dragon certainly has made their own, and certainly the detail and level of quality in the molding is probably much better. That being said, though, a lot of model builders, such as myself, we're a bit romantic. We have romanticism in model building, so seeing these older kits, there's still a lot of shine, and I think with a lot of work and a little TLC, they're still really good models, and you can learn a lot from scratch building and modifications. And I don't know if it makes you necessarily a better model builder. I just think it gives you more access to tools in your hobby workbench as far as adapting to certain little obstacles that you find in model building today, or any day actually. So enough of me talking. So what am I doing with this kit? For the most part, the kit, other than your typical, as you can see, I got some filler. There's a lot of ejection pin marks, but that's typical. But for the most part, the kit is pretty good. And the only issues that I was concerned about was these doors. I don't know what they're called. They're kind of like the gates, which can either be in the open or closed position. Right now they're in a opened or gun firing position. And I left one absent so that you can see, but the tail end right here, I left it open. So there's no screening and no modification. That's just a stock piece. And the instructions, they give you your classic screening material. And you're just to cut it to shape and glue it on like that. And I just felt that it lacked something. So what I decided to do was flash the edging, and I'll eventually put the ribs in the center, but just to flash it so that it looks a little bit more presentable, and it makes the model shine. And what's nice about it too is you can have it both in the open or closed position, and it's going to look pretty good. Let me take a moment to show the reverse. And actually, there it is. I hope you can see it, but it looks pretty good. So you can leave it like this if you want, in a traveling position. And that just looks okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to do with this build as far as modifying it. Now, that being said, you don't necessarily have to use the screening material. You can also go and buy some photo etch screen or mesh. Edward certainly makes some, and a couple other manufacturers. That might be better. In my situation, I would probably prefer it because my screening material in the packaging was a little bit warped. You really can't see it, but it was sort of like a rhombus as opposed to a square. So I had to spend a lot of time stretching it and gluing it very slowly to the frame to get it to look more like a square. But certainly photo etch mesh would work very well. in this case. And the rest of it is really just using angle piece styrene, measuring, cutting, gluing, and the little putty to fill in the seams. And so it's not really a complicated scratch build, which again is the premise behind this series, is to try to introduce scratch building to novices and beginners. There's no magic when you see scratch builders working. They started out just like everybody else in the model building community. You bought a kit, you built it, and you had fun. And as you progressed in the hobby, you saw you developed a taste for model building, and you wanted to improve things. So all these are just improvements. And like model building, as you progress and get better at it, improving your model is also a journey, and it gets better and better, and you begin to have a taste or desire to build amazing things through scratch building. And in some cases, at the very summit of scratch building, people are actually scratch building entire model kits, which is something that I probably will never do. I have no desire to do it. I'm very intrigued and fascinated by those individuals who possess that skill. But for now, I just really enjoy basic modifications. And so I want to take what I've learned and just share it with the community, because I think it's a great tool. Because you may not necessarily build this half track, and you may not build this particular thing, but what my hope is that this may inspire you, or it may get you to have a light bulb in your mind to say, hey, that's an interesting idea, and I can adapt that to a model build that I'm doing, or something that I may be building later in the future. So that's really just what this is all about. It's just about sharing and introducing ideas and setting sparks in your imaginations. So if you will allow me, I will take this opportunity to finish this last piece and finish off the remaining gates through, and I'll try to show it to you step by step so that you get a good understanding of what's going on. So here we go. This will be quite an adventure. Here's the stock piece of the gate for the half track with the screen. Now, again, you can have an option of using the stock screen that Tamiya provided, or you can get some photo etch material from some of the various manufacturers such as Edward. And the first step is pretty basic. First of all, you want to take your piece and check it out. My gates were a little bit warped, and you can have the option of heat forming it to keep it nice and straight. This one's not too bad. Heat forming's a pretty basic skill. So you can take a hard surface such as this cutting board and just clamp it down with rubber bands or clamps, and just immerse it in boiling water for about 10 seconds. The only catch with the heat forming is that with plastic that is thin or small, such as this one, you may melt it, so it may only need to go in for maybe 5 seconds. I didn't bother heat forming mine because I did have some concern about whether or not it would survive the hot boiling water, because the plastic is kind of thin. So that is one option that you can do. So once that's done and everything is straightened out to your satisfactory, the first part is really just gluing it on. So make sure you got the actual side that you want to glue on, and you make sure you have your mesh. With the flimsy Tamiya mesh, I'm not too concerned about being exact as far as getting it right on the edge. I actually go over it just a little bit, because once it's all dry, I go back and I just trim my edges. If you're going to use photo etch, I'd be a little bit more concerned about your edge work, and I would try to measure and cut your pieces as exactly as possible, and in fact try to leave it just shy of going over the edge. That way you don't have to do any trimming or filing once it's dry. because always when you work with photo etch, it is a bit fragile working with super glue. Okay, so let's go and start gluing the screen on. Once the netting was measured and cut to size, I started with gluing down this first edge right here. Now, as I said earlier, the screen that I got was a little bit out of line, so I tacked it with glue here, and once that was dry and secure, I stretched it down so that the netting would become more of a square, and then I clamped it at one end. And so now all I gotta do is dry this side, and it'll be all secure, and my squares will be squared. So probably 2 more gluing sessions and we'll be complete. And moving on towards step 2. For this next step, we're going to be using our angled styrene pieces to do the flashing. And the product I chose was strip styrene from Evergreen Scale Models, and this is their angle piece, item number 293, and it's 2.5 millimeters. So we got 4 sides, and the only side that was that's a challenge is this piece right here. As you can see, that's where it's going to insert into the floorboards of the half track, and so you have to notch them. Now, it's not too complicated. Let me separate it and hold it up here. That's pretty much all I did. And just measure it out and then notch it using your cutting knife, and then you can smooth it out with your needle files. And when measuring and cutting, I tend to be someone who measures a little bit short. That way I don't have to worry about overcutting it, and I can just sort of ease out towards the proper measurement. So obviously if you overcut it, then you're going to have to do extra work with filling. And don't worry about, if you notice up close here, I'll put it back in, if it fits. Let's see. It's being fickle. So it's pretty good. It fits in. It's pretty flush. You probably can't see it too well, but there is a little bit of a gap if you look straight across, but we'll just fill that at the end of the session. And the other pieces, there's no notches, obviously. It's just a smooth piece, and they all just kind of fit in. And again, I didn't bother. You don't have to be exact with the measurements. Again, I just leave a little bit extra hanging off, and then once they're glued in place, you can just file it down. And then the side pieces, same thing. Don't have to be exact with the measurements, because you're just going to file and trim at the end. So let's put some notches in our side pieces. Once the lengths of the gates have been set and glued in place, we can now work on the short ends. We got 2 here, 1 here, and 1 here. This one's finished, and this one is about to get cut. And so what I just do is I just lay the short end piece on top of the 2 long ones, and I just take a pencil and I just make marks where these long pieces would continue, and that would be my starting point for my notches. And once I just make these 2 parallel lines, I just go and I chop it, and as you can see, here it is. Probably just easier just to leave it right on the board. But I just these are where my lines were, and I just cut them, and then I just took a 90-degree cut along this face of the angle. And so the notches are all cut in place. Once they're cut, you can file them down smooth and to make sure that you have a nice fit. Now it's ready for gluing. When I do my lines, always I tend to, I don't want to cut it too short, so I tend to go a little bit larger. That way when I make the cut, if it is too big, all I gotta do is file it. I'd rather be filing and trimming than filling. So that's kind of my principle on that matter. But you do what is good for you. Some people may prefer to fill more than file. I don't know. So there it is, and then let's move on to step 3. I started out using strip styrene from Evergreen Models, and it is item number 124, and they're 0.5 by 2 millimeter measured strips, and these were perfect for the ribs needed. In the model case that I'm using for this tutorial, this piece only has 2 ribs, so yeah, it's pretty simple. But even using the longer pieces, it's just a matter of attaching the strip and measuring it out with a pencil, and then cutting it and placing it in. And here's my sample right here. This was, I just lay it in. Oops, let's work on this here. Just lay it in, and I put it right on the edge, and I take my pencil, and I make a mark, and I cut it. And it fits really nice and tight, and the only glue needed is probably just a little bit of liquid styrene using a brush applicator. Tamiya Ultra Thin, perfect, or any of the other really watery, liquidy cements. Once the glue is all dried, connecting the ribs, you're ready for the final step, and that's just your finish detail. It's going to consist of checking all your joint work, making sure everything is sanded or filed smooth and flush. And once that's done, look for any gaps. We have gaps right in the roots where these joints connect into the floorboards. There's a little gap right above it. And then probably there's going to be gaps in some of the joints along the edge work and where the edges and flashing connected. And that's just going to require a little bit of putty. Be sure not to get any putty on your screen or netting. I just take a little piece of Tamiya tape, or tape of your choice, just to prevent any spillage going onto the net. Fill it up using the standard techniques known in the modeling community. Smooth and sand it when dry, and you'll be all set. So let's go and fill in the remaining gaps. Well, there it is. All 3 of the gates have been filled using milliput, and then sanded smooth using sandpaper and some needle files. I worked right here where my joints are. They look pretty good. And then I worked all my joints and my corners. There's a few rough patches, but for the most part, it came out okay. Nothing else to say. Again, you can use different types of putty. Use what's best for you in your modeling experience. For me, I've been using the milliput, and that seems to do the job okay. It's thick enough that it'll fit into all these little big gaps, whereas Tamiya putty or even Mr. Surfacer would be just a little too thin. I gave my putty about 24 hours to cure before I did my sanding and filing. So now we're ready to dry fit them onto the half-track bed. The work is complete on the half-track. I've dry fitted all the gates and they all fit pretty well. We have a little bit of arching from the actual plastic itself, but that should pose no problem with a little bit of clamping during the gluing process. Unfortunately, the tailgate itself is very loose in the back, so it'll need a little extra strength in glue once it's ready for permanent positioning. I left this one gate up just to demonstrate that you can have it in the traveling locked position, and also you can have it in the firing position laid down, which is how I'm going to use it when I finally build my model and paint it. So far looking at it, I think I may paint these separately, as I want to do a little bit of a hairspray technique, as this will be a winter version as seen on the cover of the Tamiya box. So I think it'd be a little bit easier to do the dry brushing, or the brushing scrubbing of the hairspray with these pieces off first. And then I can actually hit the fender underneath. It'll be a lot easier. Well, that's a wrap for episode 1 of Workbench Creations. I thank you for watching, and I hope that this sparked a little bit of imagination and desire to try out scratch building if it's something you've never done before. I think it opens up a lot of doors for model builders, especially with a lot of the older kits out on the marketplace, which as I've shown, a little bit of work and love for model building can take some of these older kits and really make them shine. So I'm wishing you a good day, and I'll see you again here on YouTube. Model on.